Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Story Time with Og. Now, there are many religions in the world, and today I'll be reading a book called Buddhist Stories for Kids. There it is right there. I chose this book because the stories are very interesting, and sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't make sense, but sometimes a story doesn't have to make sense. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's read it together. It says Buddhist Stories for Kids, Jataka Tales of Kindness, Friendship, and Forgiveness. Well, that sounds pleasant. I think that sounds really cool. So let's read it, okay? Okay. Buddhist Stories for Kids, Jataka Tales of Kindness, Friendship, and Forgiveness by Burgess and illustrated by Sonali, Zohra. I apologize if I mispronounced your names. Beautiful names. Beautiful artwork. Oh, very nice. Oh, hit the camera. Here's the introduction. You can pause it to read it if you'd like. All right, the first story is The Monkeys in the Bodhi Tree. Long ago, in another place and time, there lived a wise monkey mother. She and her many children made their home in the branches of the Bodhi tree, where many years later the Buddha would take his seat and awaken to the truths of his life. The wise monkey had many children. She couldn't say how many because they would never sit still long enough for her to count them. One day, as they played in the great tree, swinging from branch to branch among the heart-shaped leaves, she decided it was time to teach them a lesson. "My children," she called to them. I don't know if that's what the monkey sounds like, but that's what we're going to go with today. "My children, I am not getting any younger, and neither are you. It is time that I told you about the ways of the world so that you can stop to take care of your old mother and to take care of yourselves when the time comes." That makes sense. The young monkeys turned their little faces to listen to her. "Let me ask you something, my children. Why should we work so hard to gather fruit from the trees of the forest? Our neighbors get up at dawn to gather fruit. Why don't we sleep a little later and gather our fruit from them? I have seen humans take things from one another. All you need to do is hide behind a tree when you see another monkey coming with his arms full of fruit. Jump out from behind the tree, take him by surprise, and bring the fruit back here to share with your family." "But, Mother, what if we get caught?" asked one of the other children, or the older children. "Just to be sure to do it when no one is looking," replied their mother. "And wear a mask so you won't be recognized." This sounded like great fun, a new adventure for the mischievous monkeys. And right away they scampered down to the ground and scattered into the forest to gather broad leaves to make masks that would cover their faces. Only one little monkey, the youngest, stayed behind. "What is it, my child? Why not scurry off with your brothers and sisters and do as I've asked you to do?" "Mother, you know that I love you and trust you. You have done so much for me that I would do anything you ask, but I don't understand what you say." "What is it you don't understand, my little one?" "You told us that we should steal fruit from our neighbors when no one is looking. But that is impossible." he said. His mother's heart stirred a little. Why is it impossible? Because no matter what I do, even if no one else is around to see me, I can see me. The mother tilted her head back and laughed, gathering her youngest child into her arms. You alone have understood my lesson. The monkey mother, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha, called all her children, and they sat beneath the Bodhi tree as she shared this story with them. They looked at one another sheepishly, and one by one patted their young brother on the back. The Bodhi tree smiled down upon the monkey family as the mother told her children. And the moral is always try to do the right thing, even when no one else is watching. You are watching. The Queen of the Dogs and the Neem Tree. Long ago, in another place and time, there lived a proud and wealthy man. He was most proud of the orchard of neem trees in his garden. The bark, leaves, and seeds of these trees were used to make medicines, soaps, and lotions, and they were graceful trees that gave out a wonderful fragrance and deep shade in the warmth of the day. Often the man would walk among the trees and feel their peace. He had no wife or children, but the neem trees and palace dogs kept him company. Even so, he was often lonely and afraid. To make sure that his possessions were always secure, he had a high wall, a locked gate, and many servants to protect them. One day the man left his palace to go to a village festival. The servants had carefully locked the palace gates behind him as his chariot left for the celebration. When he returned to his home, it was dark. The gates were opened, the chariot was put away, the gates were locked again, and the man went to sleep. When he woke up, he put on his slippers and robe to walk through his orchard in the growing light. To his dismay, he saw that many of the youngest trees had been torn apart. Branches and twigs lay on the ground, and shredded leaves lay about. Looking carefully, he saw paw prints and teeth marks that could have only been made by dogs. He knew there was no way that his pets, his beloved and well-behaved palace dogs, would ever do such a thing. Though he was filled with sadness, it quickly turned to red-hot anger. How can this be? The dogs of the village must have gotten in somehow. He clapped his hands, and his most trusted servant came quickly. Yes, my lord. Send out word that I want every dog from the village brought to me. Some vicious dogs have destroyed the most fragile young trees in my orchard. Since there is no way that I can tell which dogs did this terrible thing, I will punish all of them. I will offer a reward for every dog that is brought to me, and their punishment will be swift and sure. But, my lord, do it at once. Word spread quickly. The wild birds that nested in the remaining neem trees heard the man and flew quickly to the queen of the dogs and told her what had happened. Now the queen of the dogs was a strong and beautiful creature. Her fur was black and silky as the night. Her dark eyes gleamed like stars, and they could be either fierce or gentle. Barking loudly, she called all the dogs to a clearing at the edge of the village. "Tell me truthfully," she said simply, "did any of you go into the palace grounds and destroy the neem trees?" The dogs looked at one another, puzzled, shaking their heads. She believed them. "Your lives are in danger," said the queen of the dogs. "Do exactly as I say. Find a hiding place quickly, in a cave, in a hollow tree, behind some rocks, and don't come out until you hear from me." The queen of the dogs turned and trotted toward the palace. Her eyes flashed. She looked neither to the left nor the right. Several people approached her, thinking they would catch her and take her to the palace to get the reward. But something about her keen look stopped them in their tracks, and they shrank away. When she arrived at the palace, the servants, as if hypnotized, opened the gates, bowing to her as she entered. Now the queen of the dogs was very clever. She knew if her plan was to succeed, she needed to flatter the wealthy man. "My lord," she said, "you are a wise man and a kind man, are you not?" "I like to think so," he replied. "If I can prove to you that the dogs of the village are innocent, will you let them live?" The man hesitated. "There are paw prints and teeth marks on the ruined branches. That is proof enough for me." "You don't suspect the palace dogs?" she asked. He laughed. "My dogs are gentle and well trained. They would never do such a thing." "Just the same, would you be kind enough to give me permission to question them?" The queen's warm, brown, gentle eyes glowed at him and melted his heart. "As you wish," he said quietly. He called the dogs, and they sat obediently in front of the queen of the dogs. "Let me ask you," she said to the first dog. "I'm tall when I'm young, and I'm short when I'm old. What am I?" The man looked at her. What kind of question was this? "I thought you were going to question them about the crime," he said. "Please, sire, with your permission." She asked the question again. "I'm tall when I'm young, and I'm short when I'm old. What am I?" The dog cocked his head. "A candle?" said the queen. The dog began to chuckle. Turning to the next dog, she said, "The more of this there is, the less you see." "What is it?" The dog cocked his head, not knowing. "Darkness," barked the queen. The dog also began to laugh. She turned to the third dog. "What can you break, even if you never pick it up or touch it?" "I don't know," answered the third dog. "A promise," exclaimed the queen. At that, all three dogs began to laugh and laugh, rolling on the ground. They laughed so hard that they began to cough and sputter, and suddenly, leaves and bark and seeds began to fly out of their mouths. "Now tell me," said the queen gently, "have you broken a promise to this man? A promise that you were never asked to make? A promise that you would protect him and his property for that is what we dogs are meant to do. Yes, Queen, we have let our master down. And the 3 dogs hung their heads. Then the dogs jumped up, whining, and went to the master, wagging their tails. The man patted them on their heads. You have confessed your misdeeds. Promise you will never do such a thing. Again, the dogs barked in agreement. Then they trotted to the queen and bowed before her. The man said, I can see that you are truly the queen of the dogs. Please tell your friends that I am sorry I accused them unjustly. Tell them I promise that they can roam free and protected from this day forward. Let no one harm a hair on their heads. Then he said, Tell me, how did you know that it was my dogs who had destroyed the trees? The queen of the dogs, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha, smiled and said softly, Your great anger kept you from thinking clearly. You guard your possessions with walls and locked gates. It would be difficult for anyone to scale these walls. She looked deeply into his eyes. And remember, when you lock others out, you lock yourself in. The man was filled with humility. He himself bowed to the queen of the dogs. From that time on, the gates of the palace were often wide open, allowing the people of the village to wander in and picnic under the growing neem trees. Now and then the village dogs rested in their cool shade. The wealthy man was lonely and frightened no more, and he always remembered what he had learned from the queen of the dogs. The moral is decisions made in anger are rarely wise. Very, very true. This story is called The Forest Owlet Saves the Mahogany Trees. Long ago, in another place and time, there lived a family of forest owlets in a great mahogany tree. A mother, a father, and their young one. Young Owlet happened to be alone in the nest one day while his mother and father were out hunting for food. He hadn't yet learned to fly, but he had the sharp eyes for which all owls are known. From his perch in the tree, high above the mahogany forest, he watched a herd of elephants moving about in a clearing on the forest floor. As the afternoon wore on, clouds began to bunch and tumble and rumble on the edge of the sky. As they sailed slowly overhead, Owlet felt a few drops of rain, and shivered. Suddenly, a jagged arrow of lightning tore across the dark sky. Owlet fluttered in his nest, lifting his head high and turning it all around. The way owls can, he didn't see any sign of his parents returning. Where could they be? He wondered, looking this way and that. Another flash of lightning sizzled through the forest and ignited a fallen tree that lay on the ground. A wisp of smoke curled up and sparks shattered, catching dry leaves and shooting along the bark of the dead tree. Soon the flames were dancing from tree to tree, slithering up the trunks to the canopy above. The elephants smelled the smoke, saw the flames, and fled to the wide river nearby. With their long trunks, the older elephants soothed the younger ones, calming them and spraying them with cool water. Only one small elephant stayed behind, shaking under the tree that Owlet was perched in. Owlet felt afraid. Where were his parents? Then he thought about how they had cared for him, building their cozy nest and bringing him food to eat every day. They had always loved him and believed in him. He knew that if there was any way that they could be there with him, they would be. He closed his eyes and he asked his mother what to do. It was almost as if he could hear her soft words in her heart. "My child," she told him, "your father and I are stranded far away. We can't fly through the flames back to our nest. Your wings are strong now and ready to take flight. Stretch them and feel their strength. You must fly above the fire and save your young life." Owlet stood up and stretched his wings. To his surprise, he felt his wings rising up through the smoky air. Suddenly, pushing away from the nest with his claws, he took flight. Then he heard his father's voice in his heart. "Your friends in the forest are frightened. Some of them are hiding in the trees and will surely die in the flames. Can you help them?" And then Owlet heard the cries of the world. He heard the mother elephant crying, "Where is my daughter?" He heard the voices of the insects and small animals crying, "Someone help us." He heard the mahogany trees crying, "We trees are strong, but not as strong as fire." And then he heard the river crying, "Fire is strong, but not as strong as water." His father's words and the cries of the forest gave Owlet strength and purpose. He flew down to the baby elephant who stood shivering below. He cried, "Run to the river. Water is stronger than fire." "I can't," cried the little elephant. "I'm too frightened. Can't you help me?" Owlet knew what to do. He felt the strength in his wings and the power in his heart. His eyes glinted like silver as he flew to the river, swooping down, wetting his feathers and flying back to sprinkle drops on the baby elephant. Again and again he returned to the river, though it seemed his task was hopeless. He could only sprinkle a few droplets at a time, first on the baby elephant, then on the raging fire itself. He swooped and swirled through the smoke and the sparks, shedding tiny droplets on his home, the forest. They fell like tears from his wings and winked through the air to the trees below. The fire licked the leaves and threatened Owlet, but he carried on, determined to save the trees and animals of the forest. The clouds in the sky looked down at Owlet, amazed at the bravery of the little bird. Over and over, Owlet returned to the river, bathing his feathers in the water, circling back to the fire to scatter drops on the roaring flames and the frightened baby elephant. Oh. The clouds above were so moved by Owlet's bravery that they started to cry. The fire was so afraid of Owlet's strength and courage that it started to run away. The rain came down in cooling sheets, but Owlet continued to fight the flames himself. The rain poured down from the clouds, bathing the baby elephant, who shook herself and trotted down to the river to find her mother. Brave Owlet never gave up, but continued to wet his wings and sprinkle water on the fading fire down below. Finally, the fire died, and there was peace in the forest again. Exhausted, Owlet returned to his nest, which had been unharmed by the flames. The woods were cool and green. with raindrops dripping from the mahogany trees to the steaming earth below. Dark scars marked some of the trees where the fire had raged. Down at the river, the little elephant flapped her ears with joy as her mother sprayed her with cool water. Catching his breath, Owlet saw his father and mother again against the gray sky, gliding back to him, their faces shining with pride at what their child had done. From then on, the little forest owlet, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha, knew that everyone can make a difference. Each little difference can add up to a big change in the world. The Parrot and the Fig Tree. Long ago, in another place and time, a little parrot hatched out of an egg in a beautiful fig tree next to a shining river. Now, some parrots build nests in trees or on the ground, but this little parrot was born in a cozy hollow in the fig tree. His mother and father cared for him, bringing him worms and grubs to eat. They taught him how to fly and how to hide from predators in the green boughs of the tree. Soon other parrots came to live there. The land was rich, and the parrots flew about gathering nuts, flowers, fruit, buds, seeds, and insects. It was a good life. After a few months, it was time for Parrot's parents to be on their way. Parrot's parents, that's kind of hard to say. "Goodbye, my child," his mother told him one day. "I will miss you, but it's time for you to make your own way in the world. You will find good company with this tree and with your friends." She nuzzled him with her beak, and with that, Parrot's mother and father fluttered their colorful wings and disappeared into the blue, blue sky. From that time on, Parrot lived on the fig tree with the other parrots. The tree produced flavorful figs every season. Her bright green leaves sheltered Parrot in the heat of the day, and her branches provided a safe place for him to sleep at night. In turn, Parrot gave the tree the feeling of being needed and loved. In this way, Fig Tree and Parrot became the best of friends. The years went by, and one fall a drought came over the earth. The river nearby dried to a trickle. Fig Tree began to lose her leaves, and when spring came, she didn't offer any juicy figs to eat. The other parrots said, "This tree can no longer give us what we need. Let's fly away and find another place to live." But our parrot shook his head. "I was born in this tree. I grew up in this tree. From my whole life, this tree has given me everything I need. Now she's in trouble. This tree is my friend, and here I shall stay." "Suit yourself," said the other parrots, and off they flew in a colorful swirl of wings and feathers. The days went by, and the tree became twisted and dry. No more did her bright green leaves protect Parrot. No more did she feed him juicy figs. "I'm sorry. I can no longer give you what you need, my friend," Fig Tree told him sadly. And yet Parrot stayed on. He would fly to the trickle of water in the riverbed and sip up a bit of the water that was left. He would sprinkle a bit of water on Fig Tree. He became weak, eating the occasional seeds that came drifting by on the wind. But he would not leave his friend now that she was ill. Parrot looked up at the sky and cried out for help, but none came. The next day, a wise Sarus crane came flying by, with her long neck, her red head and legs, and decked out in gray feathers. She flew gracefully around the fig tree. Looking down, she saw Parrot perched in the dry branches of the withered tree. She fluttered down and settled herself on a branch next to Parrot. "Tell me, my fine feathered friend, why do you stay in this ugly gnarled tree? There are greener trees farther north. Come with me, I will show you the way." "Thank ye for your kindness, Sarus," murmured Parrot, "but this tree has been my friend for many years. We have been through good times together, and I'm not leaving her just because times are hard." Now this magnificent Sarus crane was really Avalokiteshvara, the goddess who hears the cries of the world in disguise. She had heard Parrot's cry, and she had come. Her heart was moved by Parrot's loyalty. "Tell me, Parrot, what is your most heartfelt wish?" "I wish for my friend to be returned to health and happiness, and I won't leave her side until this comes to pass. But no matter what, I will stay with her always." Sarus and Fig Tree both heard this plea. "May it be so," whispered Sarus. "May it be so," whispered Fig Tree. Sarus looked to the skies, and dark rain clouds began to gather. Fig Tree reached deep down within herself, where she found a little sliver of green life. Suddenly the skies opened, and the rains thundered down. The earth eagerly drank the rain. Green grass began to sprout from the dry earth. Soon the river ran strong, with currents tumbling over themselves, and fish leaping downstream, playing once again to the rushing water. Parrot laughed with happiness. Fig Tree sighed, and green buds began to peek shyly from her branches. Miraculously, dark purple figs suddenly pushed out of the branches into the light. Parrot was astonished. "Tell me," said Parrot to Sarus, "how did this come to be?" "Your deep love for this withered tree has stirred her roots and branches to bring forth new life. The skies and the rain heard your cry and wanted to help. You refused to abandon your friend when hard times came, and the universe heard your heartfelt wish." Little Parrot, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha, knew the true meaning of this tale. There is perhaps nothing more precious than a true friend. Oh. The Lion King and the Coconut Tree. Long ago, in another place in time, there lived a foolish hare. Her home was in a clearing near a coconut tree, which is sometimes called the tree of life. And this little hare was afraid of everything. She was afraid when the sun went down because she didn't know if it would ever come back up again. She was afraid of the rain because when the rain came down, she was afraid it would never stop. And then one day she said to herself, "What will happen to me if this world falls apart?" Wouldn't you know it? Right at that moment, a coconut fell out of the tree above and landed and bounced on the ground right next to her. "I knew it! It's happening!" she cried. "The world is falling apart. I must warn all the other animals." Puffed up and feeling quite important, she scurried off to spread the word. First she came to vain Peacock, who was proudly displaying his magnificent feathers. There was no one there to admire him. He perked up when he saw a hare scuttling across the path. Here comes someone, he thought to himself, lifting his head and looking at Hare through half-closed eyes. He paraded around, showing off his frothy, iridescent plumage. But Hare paid no attention to Peacock's display. The world is falling apart. What? How do you know? He asked. He suddenly felt silly for showing off his tail feathers when the world was coming to an end. He quickly let them droop and fold up. How do I know? How do I know? Because part of the world fell off and almost hit me on the head. That's how I know. Peacock was impressed. Don't worry, Hare, he said. I will take it from here. And he hurried off to spread the word while the little hare ran and hid. Soon Peacock saw Red Panda perched in the tall baboon tree. Red Panda, called Peacock, I'm here to warn you that the world is falling apart. How do you know? How do I know? How do I know? Because part of the world fell off and almost hit Hare on the head. That's how I know. Thanks for telling me, Peacock. I'll spread the word. And Red Panda waddled off as Peacock hid in the bushes. Soon Red Panda saw Sloth Bear hanging from a tree. What's the rush? Sloth Bear asked Red Panda sarcastically, chuckling because he had never seen Red Panda hurry anywhere, and he certainly was never one to hurry. Sloth Bear, the world is falling apart. Really? How do you know? Asked Sloth Bear. Hare told Peacock, and Peacock told me, and now I'm telling you. Thanks, Red Panda. I can help. And he lumbered off to spread the word, huffing and puffing, because he wasn't used to moving so quickly. Soon he saw his friend, Flying Fox. Flying Fox, the world is falling apart. Funny, I hadn't noticed. What makes you think so? Hare told Peacock, and Peacock told Red Panda. And Red Panda told me, and now I'm telling you. Whoa, that's big news. No offense, but since I can fly, I think I can spread the word better than the Sloth Bear. And without another word, he swooped off into the forest. Soon she spotted the Lion King below. She was afraid of Lion, but this news was too important for Lion to ignore. Still, she made sure she landed on the branch of a tree safely out of his reach. Lion, Lion, up here! Flying Fox was jumping from branch to branch, so excited that she was be the one to tell the wise Lion the news. Everyone in the forest knew of Lion's great strength, patience, and wisdom. Lion calmly looked up into the trees. Oh, hello, Flying Fox. How are you today? Not well at all. I've come to give you some terrible, terrible news. Oh, what's going on? Asked Lion. The world's falling apart, cried Flying Fox. Lion looked to the left and looked to the right. He looked up and he looked down. He looked all around. He said to Flying Fox, everything seems fine to me. What could you be talking about, Flying Fox? Well, part of the world almost hit Hare on the head. She told Peacock, and Peacock told Red Panda, and Red Panda told the Sloth Bear, and the Sloth Bear told me, and now I'm telling you. Lion couldn't help but smile at Flying Fox. Take me to the Sloth Bear. and Flying Fox did. Lion said to Sloth Bear, who was hiding behind a rock, "Take me to the Red Panda." And Sloth Bear did. Lion said to Red Panda, who was hiding in the crook of a tree, "Take me to Peacock." And Peacock did. All the animals followed along behind Lion at a very respectful distance. They got to Hare's clearing and saw the coconut lying on the ground and stood behind it, or stood around it in a circle, looking back and forth at one another. Their eyes followed the slender trunk of the coconut tree up to the top, where ragged fronds and coconut bobbed in a slight breeze. And there was Hare, hiding in a hollow tree, trembling. Because Lion was strong and patient and wise, he was also kind. "Come out of there, Hare. I won't hurt you. I understand you have tried to save all the animals by warning them about the great danger. Is that right?" Hare felt pleased to be singled out in this way. She smoothed her dappled fur and sat up a little straighter. "Why, yes, that's right. Thank you for coming, Lion. Are you going to help us?" "Yes, I am, Hare. I am going to help you. Your fear tricked you into thinking something was happening that wasn't. It was just this falling coconut that scared you. And when you upset all the animals of the forest with your foolishness, a rumor that isn't true can spread like wildfire. Let me ask you something. Imagine the world is coming to an end. What should you do?" Hare thought for a moment. "Hide in a hollow log?" she said. "No," said Lion. "You should stop imagining." Strangely enough, because Hare had bravely faced the fiercest of the beasts, she was no longer so afraid. The Lion King, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha, had taught Hare and the other animals of the forest something they would always remember. Most of the things we are afraid of never happen. The Chinkara and the Strange Tree. Long ago, in another place and time, there lived a Chinkara, a type of gazelle. This graceful and shy creature had a special love for a particular Japani fowl tree, which bore fruit that looked very much like persimmons. These fruits were the color of the sunset and as sweet as honey. Chinkara, who lived off the fruits of the forest, loved nothing better than the fruits that fell from this tree when they were ripe and juicy. Chinkara and Japani fowl had been friends for a long time. Now there lived in that forest a hunter who roamed the land with his bow and arrow looking for animals to kill. This is hard to understand, but the hunter didn't just kill animals to feed himself. He actually enjoyed killing things. Why someone would enjoy tricking a smaller, weaker creature is a mystery. But this hunter was like that. He would hide in a tree and wait until an animal came to eat the fruit. Then he would aim and shoot an arrow into them when they were peacefully eating the fruit that had fallen to the ground below. One fine spring day, Chinkara wanted a special treat. "Time for me to visit my friend Japani fowl. It seems like the fruit will be just right for me to eat today. I wonder if there are a few ripe fruits on the ground." The hunter was ready for Chinkara, for he had seen her from a distance a few days ago. He had placed many fruits on the ground to tempt her to come and feast. Then he climbed up into the branches to hide himself and wait. Come and have a nice breakfast, my friend, he chuckled. And then I will have a nice breakfast. But our Chinkara was clever. She trotted toward the tree, but then stopped in her tracks. When she saw so many fruits lying on the ground, she thought to herself, "That's strange. Usually there are just a few Japani fowl on the ground, but today there are many. I wonder why the other animals haven't come here to eat them. My mother was very wise. She always warned me that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true." She cocked her head and smelled the spring breeze, but there was something extra in the air. Could that be the smell of a human being? Through the leaves of the Japani fowl, the hunter saw Chinkara pausing at a distance. He became angry and impatient. "What's stopping her? I'll have to try something else." The hunter reached into the branches, pulled off a few fruits, and started throwing them toward Chinkara to lure her closer. This made Chinkara laugh. "Dear Japani fowl," she called, "we have been friends for many years. Usually you drop your fruit for me one at a time, and I've always thanked you for your generosity. But you've never thrown your fruit at me like you are today. No, today you are acting like my good friend. Or you aren't acting like my good friend. You're acting like a sneaky hunter." The hunter got so angry that he lost his balance and tumbled out of the tree, crying out in pain as he hit the ground. "My friend Japani fowl, I can see you have company. I will visit you another time." And Chinkara trotted away, smiling to herself. She visited all the other animals and warned them of the hunter. All the animals helped one another stay safe by letting one another know whenever the hunter and his bow and arrows were near. After many days of hunger, the hunter began to eat the fruits and nuts and seeds that grew in the forest. How delicious they were! He realized that he didn't need to kill in order to live. The trees of the forest kindly gave him everything he needed without asking for anything in return. He put aside his bow and arrows, and he and Chinkara would meet now and then under the branches of Japani fowl to share some fruit and speak of this and that. Chinkara, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha, was no longer afraid of the hunter because he was no longer hunting for animals. He was hunting for fruits and nuts. Chinkara's friend, the hunter, had shown her that anyone can learn to open their heart to others. The mischievous monkey in the banyan tree. Long ago, in another place and time, there lived a happy band of monkeys in a banyan tree. The marvelous banyan tree sends roots down from its branches that make their way into the soil and look like tree trunks themselves. So, although this was only one tree, it looked like a forest of trees. The monkeys that lived in this banyan tree were content, swinging from branch to branch and eating the delicious, juicy banyan figs that the tree generously gave to them. But there was one little monkey who was never satisfied. She liked the figs, but she loved sparkly things. Whenever people walked through the woods, she would keep an eye out in case they dropped something bright and colorful on the ground. In this way, in a small hollow in her part of the tree, she had collected a small bell, a silk scarf, a silver spoon, and a piece of broken glass. It so happened that one day a princess and her attendants came strolling under the banyan tree on their way to a nearby pond. Chatting and laughing among themselves, they didn't notice the curious monkey that swung through the branches above, following them to the pond and hoping they might drop something on the way. Monkey watched as the princess and her friends spread woven grass mats on the shore of the pond and enjoyed a picnic lunch. Then they took off their robes to reveal silken bathing clothes underneath. Monkey's eyes lit up when the princess removed her pearl necklace and hung it from a small branch on the banyan tree. While the princess and her friends laughed and splashed in the cool water, Monkey crept down and grabbed the necklace from the branch, quickly disappearing into the thick leaves of the banyan tree. She looped the necklace over her head and hurried off to her hollow, where she admired herself in her bit of glass. Then she hid the necklace with her other treasures so that the other monkeys wouldn't see it and get jealous. When the princess came back on shore, she put on her robes and then went to take her pearl necklace from the branch. "My pearl necklace is missing," she cried. Quickly her friends joined her and looked everywhere for the pearls. "Someone must have taken it while we were bathing." The group hurried back to the palace, and the princess told the king what had happened. "Show me where the necklace was when it disappeared," instructed the king's wisest adviser. The princess led him to the edge of the pond. The adviser was a keen observer, and out of the corner of his eye he saw the bright eyes of the curious monkey watching his every move from above. The adviser knew that monkeys like shiny things, and he put two and two together. He had some glass beads in his pockets, so as he and the princess walked back to the palace, he dropped them here and there on the path. Sure enough, Monkey couldn't resist following along behind them and picking up the pretty glass beads as she went. The adviser went through the palace gates but turned back to follow Monkey. He watched as Monkey scampered back to her branch. When she was so excited about the shiny beads that she didn't notice the adviser following her. She went to her hollow and hid the glass beads there. Now the adviser knew exactly where to find the pearl necklace. The next day the adviser brought the princess back into the banyan grove, and they stood under the branch where Monkey lived. The princess began to cry. "I can't believe I've lost my most precious possession," she said loudly so Monkey could hear. "My father gave me my pearl necklace on my 21st birthday." "How did you lose it?" asked the adviser. "Well, it's all my fault. I carelessly hung it on a branch of this banyan tree, and it disappeared. If I don't find it, my heart will surely break." "I'm sure that if someone took it and they knew how much it meant to you, they would return it," said the wise adviser, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha. "No one had a heart would want to break yours." After a few moments, Monkey shyly came down the trunk of the banyan tree, holding the pearl necklace in her hand. "I took your necklace. Will you forgive me?" The princess, who was kind and good, said, "I too have not always done the right thing. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for admitting your mistake and returning my precious necklace, and I forgive you." Monkey bowed her head. "Thank you," she murmured. "And if you bring me those glass beads you picked up on the path and hid in the banyan tree, I will string them into a beautiful necklace for you." At that, the monkey, the adviser, and the princess all laughed and laughed. They realized something very important. We all make mistakes. If we want to be forgiven, shouldn't we be willing to forgive? The wise woman of the forest. Long ago, in another place and time, a king and 3 of his counselors were enjoying a cup of tea served to them by a young girl. They sat in the palace garden in the long shade of an ashaka tree, whose red and yellow blossoms pleased the eye and whose great height protected them from the noonday sun. This tree is also known as the tree of happiness, because every part of it can be used to improve the health and happiness of human beings. In fact, the tea they were drinking came from this very tree. They were all in good mood because the kingdom was quiet, rich, and peaceful. The people all treated one another with kindness and respect, and all was right with the world. "I am proud of our kingdom," said the king, sipping his tea. "Let it be a model to all other nations. We are certainly the happiest people on earth. Of course," he added modestly, "a kingdom without a wise ruler, such as myself, could never prosper as we have." At this, the royal treasurer's face got a little bit red. "Excuse me, but without my careful management of our money, we would surely not be nearly as relaxed and happy as we are." The king's general had to object. He set his teacup down loudly. "I beg your pardon," he interrupted scornfully. "If I didn't protect our borders and keep our army in order, we would all be hiding under our beds in fear." This did not please the Minister of Health and Happiness. "Gentlemen," she said through clenched teeth, "might I remind you that I am in charge of our country's health and happiness? It says so right there in my title." And with that, the king and the counselors all began to talk at once, arguing with loud, angry voices about who was the most responsible for the quiet and kindly peacefulness of their kingdom. The young girl couldn't help but smile at the foolishness of the adults who were yelling about who had made the country so happy and peaceful. She put down her teapot and cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said so quietly and politely that the others immediately turned toward her, embarrassed at their own behavior. "Let me lead you to the wise woman of the forest. I think she can settle this question for you once and for all. Maybe then we can all get back to normal." The king and his counselors all agreed that this would be a good idea and prepared to go. However, they were used to sitting comfortably in padded chairs and talking about grand ideas, not walking through the forest. They awkwardly made their way over fallen logs and rushing brooks, and as their fine clothing caught on thistles and twigs, they all grumbled to themselves. But their grumbling stopped when they stepped into a clearing in the forest. There they saw a magnificent umbrella tree, and beside it a humble little hut. A woman stepped out of the hut and bowed to them. No one knew her name or where she had come from, but it seemed as though she must have lived there since the beginning of time. Her ancient face smiled at them like the shaft of sunbeams, and her eyes glowed with kindness and delight. Without saying a word, she pointed to a very strange sight. A sunbird on top of a monkey, on top of a turtle, on top of an elephant, sharing the sweet fruit of the umbrella tree with one another. "You won't believe me, but in times gone by, these 4 friends once argued with one another just as you have. Please she said to the 4 animals. "Tell them your story."
"Well," began the elephant, "we got into a fight one day about who owned this tree. I had watered it for a long time using my trunk, and that is why it is so tall and strong today. Therefore, I believe that I was the owner."
"And I," said Turtle, "said that I was the owner because I pulled up the weeds that threatened to choke it when it was young."
"And I," said Monkey, "said that I was the owner, for I stood guard and protected from the animals of the forest who might have eaten it as it grew."
"And then I spoke," said Sunbird, "reminding my friends that long ago I planted the seed of this tree myself. I hid the seed in my cheek and flew here from a distant land. Digging a hole with my beak, I placed it in the soil to grow, since this tree wouldn't even be here if not for me. Clearly, I was the owner of the tree." The wise woman of the forest, who would one day be reborn as the Buddha, smiled at her guests. "It is clear that this tree could never have been born without Sunbird, who planted it. But you wouldn't be standing under its branches today without the loyalty and care of Elephant, Monkey, and Turtle. They all did their part and have added to their own happiness, the happiness of the umbrella tree and the happiness of one another. And each of you has done your part to bring happiness to your kingdom. What is good for each of you is good for all of you. Perhaps the best way to ensure and share happiness," she said to the king of the 3 counselors, "is to wish for others the same happiness that you wish for yourselves." And she sent them off with this blessing: "May all beings be happy. May they be joyful and live in safety." And now for the last story in the book, The Monkey Tree and the Mango Tree. Long ago, in another place and time, there lived a Raja, a wealthy king. He had once dreamed of being a great and noble leader, but years of rich food, lazy days, and luxurious surroundings had turned him into a weak and spoiled man. Everyone around him catered to his every whim, and no one had the nerve to tell him no, or that's enough. One day, as he was being bathed in the river by his servants, he had long ago forgotten how to do the simplest things for himself. A strange fruit came floating along on the water. He snatched it up and beheld it with wonder. It was yellow like a lemon, green like a lime, orange like an orange, and shaped like a small melon, yet it had none of these things. He gathered his silken bathing clothes around him and stood on the banks of the river. "What kind of fruit is this?" he demanded. Each of his servants examined the fruit, but none knew its name. "Let's take it to the head gardener. Perhaps he will know," offered one of the servants. They found the old gardener in the garden, kneeling by a colorful rose bush. The Raja handed him the strange fruit. "Why, that is a rare kind of mango," the gardener said, as he turned it around in his hand, the sun glinting on the golden fruit. The Raja was always afraid that one day someone would try to poison him, So he took a small knife from his belt and cut off a small piece of the mango and gave it to the head gardener to try. The gardener exclaimed, "It is sweeter and juicier than anything I have ever tasted." Though the Rajah's mouth was watering, he was still afraid to taste the fruit himself, so he gave a small piece to each of his men. They murmured to one another, agreeing that it was a taste that they had never before enjoyed on this earth. Since no one had become ill from eating the fruit, the Rajah timidly tasted a sliver himself. It was so wonderful, with many layers of sweetness, that he, of course, immediately wanted more. But in his fear, he had carved up most of the mango and given it away. "Where can I find another?" he asked the gardener. "I've only seen one mango like this in all my life. It can be found in a mountain valley far, far upstream, on a fine and ancient tree that dwells on the banks of the river," said the old man. The next day the Rajah and his men prepared to journey upriver. The servants were ready to go in the clothes and sandals that they wore, but the spoiled Rajah had his men pack many bundles of clothing and food to take along, so that he would always have something fresh and new to wear, and something delicious and surprising to eat. The following morning they started out, making their way upstream in 6 boats, with 2 servants paddling each one. The head gardener came along, hoping that he would be able to point out the tree to the Rajah. Finally, on the evening of the 3rd day, the head gardener cried out, "There it is!" Soon the men scrambled out of the boats and helped the Rajah to his feet so that they could stand under the great mango tree. Its old roots snaked deep into the forest floor, and its branches stretched upward, a canopy of broad green leaves that blotted out the sky. And hanging from the tree, like so many precious jewels, were mangoes just like the one that Rajah had plucked from the river. The Rajah longed for just one more taste of that heavenly fruit, but the sun was beginning to fade. His men were so tired from the long journey, and the fruit was hanging so high that they would have to wait until sunrise. The Rajah ordered 2 of his men to guard the tree with their bows and arrows so that no one could steal the marvelous fruit before the morning light. He sternly warned his own men that if they so much as thought about touching the fruit themselves, they would be in big trouble. The servants unloaded the boats and built a shelter for the Rajah out of long silk scarves flowing over bamboo poles. They themselves made their beds on the soft forest floor and were soon fast asleep. But before too long, the men were awakened by the screeching and chattering of a band of mischievous monkeys that lived in that part of the forest. The monkeys' leader had brought them to just this tree to feast on the rare mangoes. The Rajah was awakened by all the noise, and he quickly rose from his bed to see the nimble monkeys dancing from branch to branch by the light of the full moon. He was furious that a band of monkeys should be stealing the fruit that he felt belonged only to him. He ordered his royal archers to surround the tree. They drew back their bows. Their arrows shone in the moonlight, aimed at the frightened monkeys. The king of the monkeys saw that there was only one chance for escape. He quickly grabbed a vine and tied it around his waist. He flung himself fearlessly into the darkness and clung with both hands to a branch in the next tree, forming a bridge with his thin body. The other monkeys, crying and screaming with fear, tumbled and scrambled over one another. They leaped across the outstretched body of their leader into the branches of the neighboring tree and on into the dark canopy of the surrounding forest, where they disappeared. The Rajah stood frozen below, looking up through the leaves in amazement. He was suddenly ashamed of making everyone taste his food and wait on him hand and foot. He felt small in his fine robes and his delicate brocaded slippers. He thought of the wise and kind leader he had once dreamed of being. This small, brave monkey, who seemed to care nothing for his own safety, was more of a king than he had ever been. The Monkey King had risked his own life and deserved to be granted safety. "Stop!" the Rajah ordered his men, who looked around and lowered their bows in surprise. "Come down," he called to the leader of the monkeys. "I won't harm you." The Monkey King untied himself and made his way down to the ground below, moving slowly, for when the band of monkeys had stampeded over him, he had suffered many cuts and bruises. His wounds were washed and tended to, and he was allowed to rest in the soft nest of rich embroidered shawl. The Rajah chose one of the fine mangoes that had fallen to the ground, and before he thought to taste it himself, he took his knife and sliced the fruit, placing it in a golden bowl for the Monkey King to eat. In turn, the Monkey King offered one of the slices to the Rajah, and they enjoyed the sweet taste in silence. When the Monkey King was clean and fed and rested, the Rajah said gently, "Tell me, how is it that you could so bravely risk your own life for the lives of others?" The Monkey King, who was the future Buddha, replied simply, "I am their king. How can they honor and respect me if I am not willing to protect them with my own life?" The next morning the Monkey King and the Rajah said goodbye, bowing to each other solemnly. The Monkey King returned to his home high in the trees with the other monkeys, as the Rajah's men set about gathering large baskets of the precious mangoes. But the Rajah instructed them to leave plenty on the tree for the band of monkeys and for the other animals of the forest. Then the men loaded up their small boats, and soon they were making their way downriver toward home. The Rajah never forgot the brave Monkey King. He had these words carved into the palace gates to guide him as he continued to lead his people. An honorable person is one who cares for others. And that is the end of the Buddhist Stories for Kids, Jataka Tales of Kindness, Friendship, and Forgiveness, by Laura Burgess and illustrated by Sonali Zohra. Thank you for coming to Storytime with Dog, and have a blessed day. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome back to Storytime with Dog. And I have 3 things to tell you today. First, you are special. There is no one like you. Second, you are loved by so many people. Never forget it. And third, in a world of darkness, you can be the light. You have it in your heart, as we all do. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.